Hello, everyone. We are back for our talk episode, and we have everyone except for Calliope and River back with us. Everyone say hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Excellent. All right, and we are going to have Alex kick us off with some dramaturgy. Turgy. It was turgy. It was supposed to be turgy.
All right. Very excited to talk about this play. There is, as always, a wealth of stuff to talk about with any Shakespeare play. So, Macbeth, first performed publicly in 1611, though we imagine that there was a private performance for King James himself in 1606. Okay, so a little bit of background about the context of Shakespeare and the era that he was performing in. We have this conception of Shakespeare nowadays as intellectual content because today the language is inaccessible because it's very archaic. So we think of it as something that's very academic, that's very pretentious. But that wasn't the case in Shakespeare's actual day because he was doing work for the masses and doing commercial work. So this was intended for a wide audience, both high class, low class, whoever. It was not considered high art so much as it was considered popular entertainment. And that meant that Shakespeare had to worry about money and who he was being sponsored by. Most people know that Shakespeare's company was originally Lord Chamberlain's men, and then once they were sponsored by the crown, became the king's men, which meant they had to pay attention to what the king would want so that they could, please the guy who's giving them their money and also who rules the country, etc., etc. So a lot of stuff that Shakespeare wrote was based on what is King James gonna like. Another thing to note here is that a lot of Shakespeare's stories, for the most part, were not original. The reason that Shakespeare is impressive and that we, still study his work today is because of his use of language more so than his storytelling. In fact, even a lot of the phrases that Shakespeare used were not original. We just attribute them to him because he was the first person to put it down on paper. And even then, the papers that we have of Shakespeare were not his. They were recordings of people who were either in his shows or went to go see them. He didn't even write anything down that we still have. So Macbeth specifically, with that context in place. Macbeth was intended to please King James I since he was Scottish and interested in the supernatural. Now, when I asked Laura and Haz what I should focus on for dramaturgy of this episode, they said the supernatural elements, because Halloween, and the political elements. But, interestingly, the supernatural elements and the political elements are super linked. So first let's talk a second about King James I, son of Mary, Queen of Scots, who succeeded Elizabeth I. James succeeded her. Mary, Queen of Scots, did not. She was famously executed. So he had a lot of pride about being Scottish, so put on a play about the history of Scotland. It's going to please the Scottish king. Let's take a second to talk about the gunpowder plot of 1605. So this was a Jesuit plot to assassinate James and replace him with a Catholic king because James was Protestant and the Jesuits didn't like that so much. If you're thinking, I've never heard of the gunpowder plot, actually you probably have and you don't realize it because the most famous person involved was Guy Fawkes because he was the one who was found under the House of Lords with all the gunpowder that gave the gunpowder plot its name. If you're English, you probably know who Guy Fawkes is. If you're not, you would still recognize his face from David Lloyd's stylized illustration in V for Vendetta, which has become the symbol of anti-establishment movement. Why am I talking about this? I will tell you. Those accused practice Jesuit equivocation, which means refusing to give clear answers. The play confirms this as a wicked practice. If you look at the text, you'll see that the witches, their whole thing is saying things that don't make sense and contradict themselves. This was intentional to imply a connection between evil, the witches, and the Jesuits, who are behind the gunpowder plot. So this was intended to confirm for the audience at large and for King James that Catholicism is wicked, whereas Protestantism is the way to go. Another thing that's interesting is sometimes in the story of Macbeth, because like I said, Shakespeare was not the first person to tell this story, Banquo was portrayed as an accomplice. But Shakespeare had Banquo be completely blameless. He just was in, a rough situation. Why might Shakespeare do that? Well, it was believed at the time that King James was a descendant of Banquo. So that was his family. So he thought. It turns out that's actually not true. So Shakespeare was kind of saying, hey, look at this guy. He was so good and fine and cool, and bad stuff happened. But there's gonna be a line of kings that comes from this guy because they thought that Banquo was an ancestor of King James.
I was wondering about the line of kings element of the play, because that doesn't show up. It's like, oh, Banquo's sons are going to be kings, but that doesn't actually show up in the play. Like, when I was going through it, I was like, wait a second, Malcolm's king at the end, not any of Banquo's people.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's an interesting,
that would be why.
There you go.
Another thing that was totally in there to please King James is basically all of the stuff about witches and witchcraft. King James actually wrote a book called Daemonology because he totally believed that there were witches and demons and that they were out to get him. And one time he was supposed to be on this voyage and there was a storm and it messed him up. And he was so certain that it was witches that did that he actually had, interesting, 3 witches killed for it. So, what do you know? This play for King James has these 3 spooky evil witches. And what is it that they talk about for seemingly no reason? Causing storms, and this random sailor who they're gonna make his ship tempest-tossed. Because when James saw that, he'd be like, yeah, this guy knows what's up. This guy knows about the witches. Interestingly enough, Daemonology also touches on werewolves and vampires. Unrelated to Macbeth, I just think it's really cool.
Is this King James Bible super gay King James?
Yes. He would be James the First.
I think so.
Right? So
I think it is.
You don't have to know that. That was not necessarily relevant to your dramaturgy. So that's fair that but I think that's him.
I also have a few notes here about the source material, essentially, for this story, like where, Shakespeare would have first read it, or, where it was first written down, and the different sources that Shakespeare would have pulled from. I don't really feel the need to go into that, but the first instance of the characters of Banquo, Lady Macbeth, and the Weird Sisters is in The History of the Scottish People by Hector Boas. So that is where those characters all came from. Shakespeare did not invent these. Shakespeare didn't invent, most of his characters. Shakespeare didn't even invent to be or not to be. That can be traced to an earlier text.
Get his
Yeah.
Phony.
These are my thoughts on Shakespeare, and this is why I was like, oh, I've got so many opinions I want to share.
Is this related to your really hot take? Because I'm very interested in it.
My really hot take. It's related to my really hot take. And it's that Shakespeare is really important historically because it's because of all these Shakespeare plays that we have so much of this recorded, even though, like I said, it wasn't him doing the recording, it was people who went to go see the plays, which is why we have so many conflicting versions. That's why he's significant. But a lot of the things that we attribute to Shakespeare, he was just writing stuff down and putting it on paper and giving it to people and telling them to read it out loud. Not all of it. There's a lot of really clever wordplay and cool stuff and cool rhetoric that is original. I'm not saying he wasn't smart. I'm not one of those conspiracy theorists who's like, actually Shakespeare was somebody else and Shakespeare was just posing. I don't think that's true. But he took a lot of stuff from other people and just popularized it because he was all about popular theater.
You're saying he might not have invented the word eyeball, Alex?
He might not have.
Gasp! Heresy!
So many phrases that are attributed to Shakespeare, if you really look, people used them beforehand. It's just this was the first time that it was in a text.
We like to assign blame as people, and I think that also translates to wanting to assign attribution to people in ways that they don't necessarily always deserve.
Exactly. These are my 2 little fun facts that are not directly related, but I just wanted to share them. One is, in my research, I discovered that the whole prophecy about trees walking, etc., may have inspired Tolkien to write the Ents. So people think that is where the Ents came from. Now this one is just a personal favorite of mine. If you're in the mood for some iconic Macbeth parody action, you want some comedy after all this, one of my favorite books is Weird Sisters by Terry Pratchett, which is about 3 witches who accidentally find themselves involved in a succession plot. And it is a fantastic book. And I love Terry Pratchett so much. And it does such a good job of satirizing Shakespeare and the play. And it's a lot of fun. So that it was just on my mind the entire time we were doing this play. All right. That's awesome. My notes.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, on the subject of Macbeth as a comedy, like, we had a lot of fun sort of behind the scenes on this one, like, during our read-through. Yeah. There's just, like, a lot of stuff in this play that can be funny. Like, the idea of, having a guest at the dinner party of where he's seeing the ghost of Banquo, and, like, what would it be like to be that person?
So we need to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Macbeth for that person.
That's basically exactly what I've been thinking this whole time. Was like, I kind of want to write a version of Macbeth from the perspective of someone who's just like, what the is happening right now?
Well, and director Sam Gold's Macbeth on Broadway, starring Daniel Craig and Ruth Negga, tried to market itself as a comedy. But I feel like through this reading, we found the funnier parts of the play than they did. Like, it was completely serious about the 10,000 geese, but failed to realize that a Mission Impossible fight scene between Macbeth and Macduff wasn't hilarious.
So yeah.
Now, there were parts of this play that we cut out. Laura, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about them now. I'm going to talk about them really fast. So, things we cut. I kind of have this written down in reverse order, which is bad. It's all over the place. Some stuff. Act 4, Scene 1 with the witches and Macbeth, we cut. There's an entirely new character that is introduced. The goddess Hecate is in this play. A lot of times people cut that, and we cut that because we did. Sorry, the reason that we cut for this play was we cut for time. We were trying to get it under 2 hours. Some other stuff that we cut a scene, Act 2, Scene 4, Ross and the old man are talking about some weird stuff that happened, like the horses are eating each other. It's crazy. We cut Act 2, Scene 3, the porter, Alex's favorite character who they wanted to play. The porter is answering, knocking at the door. We cut that. We cut Act 4, Scene 3, Malcolm and Macduff. Malcolm has this whole, like, monologue that's really weird, and it's like, I would be a terrible king. I'm just so lustful. Like, I would go for all of your wives and mistresses and everybody, and like
too hard.
Exactly.
Too horny for the throne.
Exactly. And then Macduff is like, well, that's weird. Like, but I guess you'd still be a good king. And then eventually Macduff is like, what? Like, you would be an awful king. And then Malcolm is like,
now that I think of it,
Malcolm says, great, you passed the test. I was just testing you. I'm not actually lusting after anybody. I'm actually great. So we cut that because it was weird in time. And we also cut originally when Macduff asked about his children. Ross is like, yeah, they're fine. Let me talk more about Scotland. We cut that. Now Ross just says...
I have to say I missed that a little bit. Because Ross is trying to avoid the subject there. And he says, no. And he says, actually, no, they were well at peace when I did leave them. It was all fine. Don't worry about it.
They were sure at peace, all right.
Ross lies.
Sorry, I just realized that
when I last saw them, they were alive. But...
Okay, so that's some stuff that we cut. If you want to know more that we cut, look up Macbeth on Project Gutenberg and compare it to our thing.
If you want to know more, do it yourself.
Sorry, I think I wrote down a lot of the stuff. It's very late at night while we're recording this, if you couldn't tell. And even later
sorry, I wasn't
Alex.
making fun of you, Laura, I promise.
No, it's cool.
I was just being silly goofy.
You were being as silly as 10,000 geese.
10,000 geese, the most terrifying foe I could possibly imagine. Genuinely.
I remember learning a really interesting fact about that scene at Shakespeare camp, which is that the reason that in text Macbeth is like going off on this kid, and he's like, you look so afraid, you whey-faced lily-livered, like you're so scared, what the all that, is because that role would have been played by a young kid who had one line and was really nervous about when to go on and would be nervous about his cue. There was something about how like the cue line keeps getting repeated, so he wouldn't know when to come on, and he would probably be really confused in real life. So he actually would just be like a nervous kid, so he wouldn't even have to like act. So and that's why that text is in there.
Nice. A question that we like to ask about all our plays, I think Emily has some thoughts on this one, is does Macbeth hold up? Should we be doing Macbeth? And if we are doing it, thoughts on how it should be executed? Has wanted me to say that particularly. Thoughts on how it should be executed, like, because how you like are kind of executing.
Knee slapper.
So what do people think? Should we do Macbeth?
I do have a lot of thoughts about this, if you don't mind me talking really fast. I think that all Shakespeare should continue to be done only for the sake that, like, we as a society exist through story, and if we don't continue telling old stories, then we will never continue to learn from them. If we let them fade, then they can no longer continue to serve the people like us who are continuing to put voice to them today. That being said, I get really picky with what modern adaptations of Shakespeare I tend to enjoy. Recently I've been just really loving Balls to the Wall, Everyone is Trans, because that makes me really happy. And I'm tired of seeing the same types of people continue to be the only ones who are lauded for retelling these stories. Getting to play Lady Macbeth in and of itself is like incredible for me because she's incredible, but also like being a trans person and getting to say the lines like unsex me here. There is so much there. There's this trans scholar who their name is escaping me right now, but has some incredible theory about retelling Shakespeare in the trans perspective, and how a holistic narrative of a trans person needs to applaud not only their transness but also recognize their struggle. And I think that's just a really cool thing to keep in mind. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm glad you think that we should do every Shakespeare still being performed. When we do King John on this podcast, we'll give you a call.
Oh, wait a minute.
Can I follow that up with my hot take?
Yes, please.
Okay, here's the clickbait. Here's the you see this article and you go, what? Surely that can't be true. Here's the clickbait. We should stop performing Shakespeare. Here.
Oh,
thank you, Drew.
No.
This better
Alex
be good.
Kingsley slam Shakespeare.
We want to hear what you want to say.
That who I once called my friend, my brother.
That's it. You've displaced the mirth.
So here's the thing. I think we should continue to study Shakespeare for multiple reasons. One, like Emily said, these are important culturally, and we should continue to have that cultural awareness, but also just the fact that studying archaic language and learning to understand that is good for your brain. That's a good skill. I think it's very important that I studied Shakespeare texts starting at a young age.
Alex, are you saying everybody should go to Shakespeare camp like we did?
I wasn't, but that being said, everyone should go to Shakespeare camp. I loved Shakespeare camp. Shakespeare camp is also part of what turned me against Shakespeare. It's because, well, here's what I discovered. It was great to study. It was great to learn. It was fascinating. It opened my mind. It's also everywhere. It's also super accessible. It's some of the most accessible theater in the world. And I'm not saying that everyone should stop doing Shakespeare. If you're a high school and you don't want to pay for the rights and you have the opportunity to teach your kids Shakespeare, like, go for it. If you are a local theater, if you are any theater, if you are Broadway, if you are whatever, we have seen Shakespeare so much. There are so many struggling playwrights out there, and their biggest competitors are not each other. They are old, crusty, dead white men. That is your biggest competitor as a playwright. What I'm trying to say is that I think it's super cool that we can have these discussions about transness in Shakespeare, things like that. But if there was a local theater or a Broadway show and they were like, we're doing trans Shakespeare, I'd rather they put on a play by a trans playwright. Like, I'd rather they just, like, when people talk about Shakespeare being relevant, I'm like, yeah, sure, it is relevant today. But you know what's more relevant today? A play that was written by a contemporary person who is almost definitely struggling to get their performed. So don't do it. Don't do it. That's my hot take.
That's a hot take.
So Alex actually wants us to stop doing the podcast because
no. But because
from now on, we are going only to do plays that Alex writes.
Yeah.
Only
this was Alex's big plot all along.
No, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Because the lovely thing about this podcast is that what it does is it takes plays that are not super accessible and puts them in a format that people can listen to. And that's what's really wonderful.
I think one thing that we're also hoping to do with the podcast that we haven't done yet, but are hoping to maybe do next month, is to find some public domain plays that are lesser known, and give places like those high schools that you talked about that need to be able to do stuff for free, putting on stuff with your friends for free, like the opportunity to do some things that you haven't heard of yet, that are good, because like...
I want to be clear, I wasn't trying to criticize y'all's choice to put on a Shakespeare play in this podcast. I think it was a cool...
We also like to ask every month what we think a modern adaptation would look like, and I have been a champion for a while, and some of you also thought this too, that in a modern adaptation, Macduff's dad should be trans, and his trans dad was the one who gave birth to him, and that actively subverts the prophecy or adheres to the prophecy, I guess is what I meant to say, in a way that I just love. And I think personally, I think that this would take place well at a high school in a like Tracy Flick election kind of way of just like beating each other down and seeing what happens next.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, of kind of like a Heathers-esque thing.
Yes.
Of like they're just, you know, there's like the popular kids and they're killing each other, and I don't know. I could definitely see a Macbeth at a high school.
I could see that working pretty well, and this is not among my favorite of Shakespeare's plays. But I think this would work well.
Who loves Shakespeare, by the way. Shakespeare has his favorite playwright.
That's not true.
Okay, I'm about to be like, I'm so sorry that I...
No, I land somewhere in between you two.
Spoke.
But...
I will say, a dear friend of mine saw this time last year a production of Macbeth in Central Park performed by a student group where it was a bunch of kids, like teenagers, performing Macbeth like that was the thing. It's like, we're gonna put on Macbeth in the woods and we'll have our flashlights and we're all just getting drunk and like having fun. And then at the end of the play, when Macduff murders Macbeth, one of the kids, it is an actual murder. And so it is like drawn out of this fiction that this group of friends has created for each other, and it's whole what did we just do? Which I think is very, very
But the
cool
actor was not murdered, right?
I was like, what?
I
was like,
whoa.
Within the plot of the play, the person died.
You can just do anything in Central Park, huh?
That is so interesting to me. That feels like it's just a different play.
Yeah, it almost is.
And that's part of what we like. If you want to do, you know, that's part of what we like about public domain plays, right? Is that you can take something and you can do anything you want with it.
Yeah.
So it can be like this is Macbeth in a high school, or it can be like, this is Macbeth and we just killed someone for real.
Yeah.
Or it can be like,
don't do it at home.
this dog's name is Macbeth and he's gonna bark for a while now.
This dog's name is Macbeth, and he has a whole team of other dogs, and they're gonna win a basketball
Yeah.
tournament.
That will actually be a really funny concept, is where the like physical action happening on stage is a completely different story, but they're saying lines from a Shakespeare play, so it's the text of Macbeth, but with all the action from Air Bud.
Yes.
But for all that I said about like not performing Shakespeare, I will say I have never seen someone stage Shakespeare tragedy as a comedy, and you absolutely could do that. So one thing that it was making me think was like, it would be fascinating to approach this exact text and just say, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to lean into the tragedy at all. This is fully a comedy. I've never seen that, and that is a production of Macbeth that I would go to / put on.
Yeah.
This
So
is
next
just
month.
funny.
Well, and I think it's interesting to have modern adaptations in that way, so that we can, not to beat on about Shakespeare's relevance, but just like think about it's kind of a collaboration between modern playwrights and Shakespeare. I don't know. Me writing Jane Austen adaptations as a like trans playwright is different than just performing a straight Jane Austen adaptation.
Yeah.
Emphasis on
Absolutely.
straight Jane Austen adaptation.
Hey!
We want queer ones.
Yes.
Well, and that's what's really exciting about like groups like this, like the podcast you've created, which is so cool. And like bringing all these different people together is I am just always so grateful to hear like new perspectives and like broaden the way that I see like media and literature and theater. And that's a really cool opportunity for anyone, if you're listening to this, hearing opinions that are different than yours about the plays that you love are nothing but a gift, because everyone will approach something based on their own life experience, and that's not something you can replicate in any way with your own mind. So listen to other people and like allow them to expand your vision, because that's been like a really great thing that I've gotten to do over the past 2 days with these people. It's midnight and I'm sappy, but yeah.
Fair enough. Does anyone else have any other hot takes they want to do before we start plugging things and signing off? The take doesn't even have to be that hot. I'll allow lukewarm takes.
Can I recommend a book?
Yeah?
Yeah, please recommend a book.
Well, these last days, studying the work Macbeth, and I've been completely absorbed by it. I actually had to do a lot of things this week. I did nothing, just Macbeth. and the subject and everything. So I have been watching performances online. I have been listening to podcasts, and I would like to recommend the podcast Shakespeare for All. It's called. There are 3 episodes dedicated to Macbeth, where we can listen to Emma Smith from Oxford University, and it's very interesting. They're very short, the episodes. And I also want to recommend the book the edition that I read with the play, that is the Arden, I don't know how is that pronounced, but Arden Performance Editions, ARDEN, edited by Catherine Steele Brokaw. I don't know if that's well pronounced anyway. And they have a lot of comments about so many things: punctuation, meter, of context. It is, you can find the whole play, and it's all with annotations and comments all the way through the play. So it's very, very interesting. I really recommend it.
Yeah, I also want to give thank you, Base, for giving us those recommendations. I want to give you like a huge shout out for how well you tackled this play, because I know, when I was looking for people to do it, you reached out and you said, like, I think I might want to do this, but like it might be too difficult. Will I be able to read it ahead of time? Will I be able to do stuff? And I said, this is, please do this with us. We want people to get to do new things. And you came and you blew it out of the park, and you did so much like extra textual work and stuff like that. So thank you for being a part of this. All of our actors really did a great job with this, if I do say so myself. um, and I also want to give a brief shout out before we give people a chance to promote stuff to Calliope George, who is not here right now because she had to go to bed, but played our Malcolm tonight. We had a last minute actor who couldn't make it, so she was cold reading tonight, and we really appreciate her for doing that. Now I'm gonna shout out your name and you can promote your stuff. What do you want to promote?
I will promote my Twitter, the has Katie. That is also my Archive of Our Own name, which I always shout out because I want to. Also, this is more about the podcast itself, but if you want to give us a rating or review on the podcast app of your choice, we actually have one that I just found in iTunes, which I bet was our super fan Molly, who is great. Shout out to Molly. But it's a very sweet review that we got.
Okay, Alex, what do you have to promote?
Hi, I got a few things. I work with a company called Strong Branch Productions, and we do a lot of cool and fun stuff, including a sci-fi comedy called The Stench of Adventure that I write, and it's a lot of fun. We also have a few other shows, including Tales from the Radiator, which is premiering this Halloween very shortly, which is going to be super cool. I also have some short stories out here and there, and one actually that came out today, which I'm super excited about. That's called Coffee Date with the Eternal One, and you can find it in Orion's Bow, which is a queer speculative fiction magazine. But for more information about all of that, you can just follow me on Twitter. I am at AlexyQuest. That's like Galaxy Quest, the 1998 cult classic sci-fi comedy film. But it has my name instead. Oh, I also do tabletop games, alexyquest.itch.io. You can get them for free, because I think games should be accessible if they can be.
Excellent,
Such good
Alex.
games.
Thank you. Emily, do you have anything you'd like to promote?
I do. I am an actor. I'm a songwriter. I am a big fan of a lot of things. You can find me on Twitter at Captain Saf. Captain, like of a pirate ship. Saf, like the beginning of Sappho. Under the name Emily Laris, I do a whole bunch of things. I write for a horror anthology podcast called Neighborly, Audioverse award winning. Very, very excited to be doing that. I do other voice acting. You can find me on Aurora Everlasting and the Tranthologies podcast. And you can find my music on Twitter. I write a whole bunch of fan music for the Skyjacks podcast because that's my life. And yeah, that's me.
Beautiful. Drew, if people want to stalk you, can they do that?
They can absolutely stalk me. My full name is Drew Vollmer with a V as in Victor. Feel free to be a little creep. I don't have much to promote right now. The last really cool thing I did was this. So listen to this again. I don't know.
That's sweet and sad.
I didn't mean for it to be sad.
Oh, well then it's just sweet.
Peter, our Macbeth, what would you like to tell the world about?
Oh, I have I'd say nothing of note to report or to promote. If you felt so inclined to follow my Instagram, it's just at Peter_Kicklack. That's KIEKLAK. It is not interesting. When I am long gone, it will be a testament to nothing. But I will say I had a lot of fun on this project and hope to be a part of more in the future. Because making plays accessible for everyone is awesome, and I think everyone should read plays and do plays and enjoy theater and all things that are creative and artistic. So keep doing that.
Yeah, and if anybody in New York wants to hire Peter to do Shakespeare for them because he rocks at it, do it. And
yeah, oh my holy God in heaven, please, if you want to hire me,
Give this man your money.
if
We
you
will
believe
call
in
you
that sort of
tomorrow,
thing.
tomorrow, and tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Please, what do you have for us?
Well, I cannot promote much paid by myself because I am a live stage performer. I am a musician. So unless you come to Austria, you're welcome, of course. But online, I do voice acting, I cosplay, all kind of different things, which you will discover if you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok. I think that's all, yes. With the same username, that is Madame Beus, Madam Beus, Madame Beus. So that's me, and you will find me there.
Perfect. Thank you, Baze. Haz, do you want to close us out?
No, I want you to promote our
Oh, I'm sorry.
Laura.
Okay.
You didn't call your own name.
Oh, Laura, is there anything you want to promote? Yeah, of course. I want to promote this podcast that I've been
Yay.
working so hard on and love, and I'm excited about it. And I love this podcast so much, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. Follow us on. I don't remember. What
Okay, hold on. Let me look up the Twitter real quick. Is it PD Plays? I'm literally
Just
on it,
follow
following
us.
all of you. All right, follow us on Twitter at PD Plays Pod. You can also email us at publicdomainplays@gmail.com if you're interested in auditioning for our I don't know, troupe, whatever you want to call it, for one of to be on an episode. You are welcome to shoot us an email, and we will figure something out.
Perfect. Well, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, we'll
More like today.
Because it's already
Ooh.
a new
It's
day
already
for
tomorrow
the-
and
it's 12:14
tomorrow.
a.m. on
Especially
the
with
East
this
Coast.
difference of time zones.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next month for. We're definitely gonna see
An
you next month.
undetermined
That's
play.
for sure. Okay. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
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 Later.
Peace.